thank you all. Before I start, I'll just do a brief chant that is intended for creating, helping to shift gears from being outwardly focused to being focused on this topic. It's a non-sectarian type of thing, and it's just basically asking that the communication goes well all the way around and that we all derive benefit from it. So it goes, Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So it's, as I mentioned, what the intent was, and you say peace 3 times for the benefit of the peace in the big world out there, peace in our immediate surroundings, and let there be peace within ourselves, especially as we're undertaking this topic today. And of course, this topic is a topic which is probably something everybody is more or less familiar with in some way, shape, or form, because, everywhere you turn, you see the word yoga. And of course, most of the connection to yoga has to do with Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga means the postures, doing the various postures. And those postures, of course, they are intended to provide a physical benefit as well as a mental benefit, as well as, in some ways heading off at the pass, if you will, challenges that the body has with reference to disease and so on. So Hatha Yoga is that yoga which is the one that is most commonly known, which people are aware. But then you hear terms like Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, Kriya Yoga, Visa Yoga, Thatha Yoga. So, and people are getting creative with the various yogas that they, terms that they use around yoga. And from the perspective of the tradition, and my, of course, background is related to having studied the whole traditional, Vedic format, if you will. So there's some basis for it. I'm not making this up, and I'm not presenting something which is sort of sketchy as far as talking about this particular topic. It has yoga itself. The word comes from the root yuj meaning to join. So to join, when you join, it means that there's some kind of a connection that occurs. And that is the commonly understood meaning for this word. But in addition to that, it has another meaning, which is the yogaschitti nirodha, which is, or yogaschitta nirodha, which is one of the first sutras of Patanjali, in which it talks about yoga meaning something in which there is mastery. One gains a certain mastery. So the challenge, of course, is, if this yoga, understanding yoga, because it has seemingly all these different connotations, and each one relates to doing something different, and then that means that, well, which one is the best one? Which yoga is the best yoga? Because if all of these varieties of things are being offered, and is it a connecting kind of thing, or is it something in which I should gain some mastery? Because these are the 2 meanings of the word yoga, okay? 2 main meanings. And so the challenge comes because, if somebody is intent, I guess the first question really is, why would you want to bother with any of it? Especially if it comes to mastery. Because mastery means I have to do some work. And I have to, it means also that it implies that there's something that I don't know that I should come to know. And in coming to know that, I then have to put a lot of effort into it. And of course, the connection is made to what happens, you see in India, the various sadhus and all these people, sadhus meaning the renunciates, who are practicing all kinds of yoga. And, it scares the living daylights out of you, when you see it, because, there are pictures of people who have been standing on one leg for years, or, all these things that present a picture of yoga, which is like, who would bother with that? Why would I want mastery like that? Why? And of course, I wasn't going to say it, but, you can't give a talk like this and not say something about the standard practice, these powers that these yogis gain, and the traditional picture that we in the West see, which is an aberration, by the way, is of the mendicant lying on a bed of nails. Okay, having mastered, that's where the mastery is, mastered the, sensations of the body and becoming strong in a way that he, heretofore was not strong. But again, the question begs, why would you want to do that? What is the point of this? And why would anyone undertake to pursue this type of practice in which one gains a mastery? So these kinds of questions come up, and again, as they relate to your everyday life, how is any of this any benefit to you? Because really, that's what you want to have, is something that's going to benefit you. You don't want to be bothered with any of this if it doesn't help you in some way, if it doesn't do something for you. And, if it requires all this effort, then, it might benefit, but the putting in the effort is tremendous. And you can't live your everyday life either if you're going to do that kind of yoga, because that means, you have to put in very focused effort to get these very focused results. And so even in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, in the second and fourth, the third and fourth padas, these chapters, they talk about when these practices are done over a period of time, one gains certain powers, certain, abilities. And yet at the same time, they also Patanjali weaves into that a cautionary note that one does not want to get carried away with these things. So it's like, yay, Patanjali, thank you. Because that means what? I don't have to take these things too seriously. I don't have to go off to a cave and sit there for years and, to gain these siddhis and do all those things that you see or you understand, especially hatha yogis doing. So I don't have to do all that, because he already says, these are all just related to powers, siddhis. Siddhis are accomplishments. Accomplishments are things that, they're impressive, but who cares if you can stand on your one leg for years on end, or some of the other things that you see in these pictures. What does it matter that you can do all this? Because it doesn't connect to your day-to-day life. You want something that's going to connect to your day-to-day life, where you are right here, right now, and determine whether or not it is something that is going to give you a satisfactory takeaway, if nothing else. So this is what anything should do. Any spiritual pursuit is meant to bless you in some way. It doesn't matter what it is. And that's what it should be doing, no matter what it is. And so in terms of yoga, what would be the intent or purpose of focusing on any kind of yoga, if I'm not going to derive something from it? And if I'm a person who is, looking at what's going on in the hatha yoga world, which we are surrounded by this, and I must add, sadly, a lot of misrepresentations of it, then, it's like, I'm way over that. I'm not going to be doing any hatha yoga like that anytime soon. So again, does that mean it's totally useless? that I don't want to be bothered with this pursuit of yoga in any way, shape, or form. Well, that's, what's the intent of this talk is to talk about, what does yoga really mean and what does it really do? And how is it that it can benefit anybody? And it's not, I am, for what it's worth, I am not here to talk about doing hatha yoga practices. Not to dismiss them, they're wonderful. I do some myself, Surya Namaskar and a few others, and they're wonderful and very helpful. But that is something which benefits, again, the physical body. It can benefit the mind, and the breathing, of course, you can do with or without the yoga. What we are here to explore are the other types of yoga, which, when they are understood, should somehow or other make a difference for you. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there's the Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga is called, it's called the king of yogas. It has to do with using the mind. And again, depending on what definition you look at where, you're going to get a different understanding of what this means. And then you have Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, okay? And then you have Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion. And then you have Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. And then you have Kriya Yoga, the yoga, again, of various disciplines and spiritual practices. Well, guess what? Because this is the thing. Which yoga is the best yoga? Which yoga is suitable? What does it do for me? Going back to that same question. Because there's no point in pursuing any of it if it's not helping you in some way, shape, or form. So this is what we need to understand. So out of the gate, what am I going to tell you? I am going to tell you that if you look at the meaning of the two meanings of yoga, meaning one is connection, the other is mastery, we will look at them in terms of how they apply, and then come to discover that, really speaking, there's really the idea is to have this a connection that goes beyond connection, which I will be talking about in the latter part of this talk. But initially, I'm going to say that any form of yoga is really, there is no real separation of yoga, of one thing of yoga to another, no matter what anybody says. Because, why do we say that? Because if somebody has, yoga is intended to make you spiritual. If it's intended to and or give you a spiritual pursuit or a focus, then if any form of expression of spiritualness becomes then a yoga. And there's how do you separate it out? For instance, if somebody says, I do karma yoga, that's what I do. I don't do anything but karma yoga. Okay, karma yoga means what? That in order to do karma yoga, you have to be spiritual. If you have to be spiritual, that means what? You have to have some connection to a higher power. All right? Some connection has to be there to a higher power. Okay, if that's the case, higher power is what is associated with a devotion to a higher power is called Bhakti Yoga. Okay? Bhakti Yoga means devotion. I'm a Bhakti Yogi. I do nothing but devotion. Okay, fine. So what is the difference then if I'm a karma yogi and I'm doing actions for the sake of a spiritual development and therefore I am connected to a higher power? How is that any different than being devotional? In order to do karma yoga in that context, and we're going to see a slightly different presentation of karma yoga shortly, but for now, for purposes of this, my statement was there really is no difference between one and the other, because all are expressions, if you will, of that same, in a way, spiritual pursuit. In that, if I'm a karma yogi, I must necessarily have devotion. You cannot be a karma yogi and not have a devotion of some kind. If you're a bhakti yogi is not someone who, just generally speaking, there may be a few exceptions, but generally speaking, a bhakti yoga is not someone who sits, just being devotional all day, right? They also have to get out and about and do, survive and do things that are in the world. So somebody says, I have this high devotion towards, as I go about my day, I would ask the same question. How is that different from a karma yogi? A karma yogi is doing and has a devotion. A bhakti yogi has devotion and is what? Doing. So where's the difference? Okay? And you have to look at it from the standpoint of every human being has all these different, these expressions, natural expressions. At one point in our lives, we may be emotional, and not just at one point. In any given day, we go through. What do we go through? We are emotional, we are intellectual, we are spiritual, and we are active, and, we move through these various expressions in any given 24-hour period. This is what we're doing. We're moving from one expression to another. So that says to me that really, and according to the definition of yoga, being connected means what? At all times you are connected. Sometimes this way, sometimes that way. It's really, yoga boils down to, in that connotation, and again, we're going to see a slightly different meaning shortly, or we're expanding, I would say, how this all works. But for now, just thinking about it from the perspective of, again, all day, every day, what do? You move from one level of expression to another, and you keep moving. It depends on what's going on for you at any given time during the course of that day. So therefore, that means what? That you cannot separate, if it's yoga, because yoga is relating to, what are you doing? You are attempting to have a connection to a spiritual power, a higher spiritual power, if you will, and or what else? You are trying to gain mastery. What kind of mastery? A mastery, not like the guy that's standing on one leg mastery, but a mastery over what? The distractions that hit you at every turn, for which we have our wonderful media in part to thank for. Because the media, in whatever way it's calling your attention, it's begging you to look. So, and, it can be fun, it can be entertaining, it can be informative, it can be useful. All of that is, not to denigrate it, but just to say that at some point it's overkill. At some point, you being too distracted not only doesn't help the world, it doesn't help you, and or you just get drained from all of it. So that's just one example of distractions. We can invent all kinds of distractions and or disruptions, anything that keeps us from focusing on the bigger picture goal. So anytime anything takes our attention away, we have to be somewhat alert and attentive and bring it back. And why do we do that? Because again, if you don't have a reason for doing that other than somebody told you, somebody said so, somebody said I should be, if I want to be spiritual, then what do I have to do? I have to have self-mastery. I have to be a yogi. That's what they said. And they sounded like they knew what they were talking about. And their books were impressive. Fine. Books are great, they might inspire. But you always also have to take them with a grain of salt. Because it's really easy to write anything and sound good. But, the real world, it's like, maybe not so much. Maybe they don't even live the life that they talk about. It's you take what you can, but you also keep an open mind. Don't swallow it all. So but I want to do is why do you want to be spiritual is also the question. Why do I even care about any of this? Why am I bothering? I mean, really speaking, why are you bothering? Why would you come here on a Sunday afternoon and listen to anything? Why would you bother? Because somehow or other, whatever is being presented is something that shifts your mind. You recognize that what you see in the world itself is not, is somehow challenging and somewhat lacking. Anybody who undertakes any form of spiritual pursuit, whether they have cognized this, distinctly in their minds, or whether it's just that feeling of whatever I'm doing is not enough. Everyday life and all these pursuits is not enough. I want something and need something more. Okay, this is a spiritual pursuit. A person who has turned their mind's attention, just for a little while at least, away from the ordinary everyday course activities, because the ordinary everyday course activities are not working. There's an emptiness there. You talk to anybody who's on a spiritual path, I don't care where they're coming from, they will tell you the same thing. Something was missing. Something was lacking. I was somehow looking to get something more, and it wasn't coming from anything else. And of course, the logical explanation for that is all those other things are things that are of a limited nature. Anything that you do in the everyday world, everyday life, is always limited. What do we mean by that? It begins in time and it ends in time. So things begin in time, they end in time. That means that the activities that I undertake, they begin in time and they do what? End in time. The results I get begin in time and end in time. So that even the person who is the most successful still has that sense of something lacking. Because the flip side of that is, if gaining everything that I could possibly gain in this world was enough, I would sit back and say, I'm good to go. I'm done. How many people do you see doing that? How many people do you see really saying, I'm good to go? All those billionaires out there, are they doing that? Not really. They're out there going some more. And I'm digressing. But I'm going to tell you this quick story around this. And then when I come back to the topic, don't let me forget to talk about the hand, okay? So anyway, first of all, there's a story that is relating to what I'm talking about. People are in search of something more than what is limited. Everybody, when you really ask them, they don't want something limited, they want something limitless, isn't it? You want something that's not going to quit on you. You want something that's going to last. And so the things that you do, as much as you can enjoy them, as much as you might get some benefit, is if it's something that begins in time and ends in time, the result that comes will begin in time and it will end in time. And you don't like that. You want something that's going to last. If you want something that's going to last, something which is limitless, then limitless is not going to come from doing things that begin in time and end in time, and results that begin in time and end in time. This is why people seek spiritual, some undergo spiritual pursuits or whatever, because they recognize that somewhere, somehow, that's where limitless is. It's not here, it's there. And they go in search of that, which is, applaudable. Anybody doing anything in any way along those lines, God bless them. Because that's their mind, as I said, even if they don't articulate like this is really where they want to go. And that will, if they pursue in earnest with sincerity, they will benefit by that. So the story, though, is about this fisherman who was walking on the beach. Could kind of work here. But so this a commercial fisherman. He's walking on the beach. And he picks up this conversation with this very well-to-do tourist who's also walking on the beach. So they start having this conversation. And so the fisherman, the tourist says, oh, so you're a fisherman, a commercial fisherman. He said, yes. And the tourist says, well, it's a little early. Why are you not still out there fishing? It's an afternoon. He's having an afternoon walk. Why aren't you out there fishing? Okay. And the fisherman said, well, I had a certain quota of fish that I wanted to catch today, and I caught that many fish, and I was satisfied, so I came in. And so the tourist said, well, have you thought about, you might want to think about if you'd stayed out a little bit longer, since you were catching so many fish, maybe you could have caught a few more. And the fisherman said, yeah. He said, I guess you're right. I could have caught a few more. But if I caught a few more, then what would I do? And so the tourist is thinking, well, duh. If you catch a few more fish, you get what? You get a little bit more money, obviously. Make a little more money. And so the fisherman said, yeah, that's right, I would. So then he says, and then the tourist says, and if you keep doing that, what's going to happen? Why, you can get another boat. And the fisherman says, yes, I could. And the tourist continues and he says, and if you got another boat, what? You could catch more fish. If you can catch more fish, then what? You can make more money. And then, of course, it goes from there. Pretty soon you have a fleet. You have a fleet of fishing boats, catching fish, making more money. Pretty soon you can cut out the middleman. You can have your own plant here, and you can process the fish, and make more money. And the fisherman is, nodding in agreement this whole time and thinking, yeah, this is great. This is wonderful. I like this idea. But he says, well, then what would I do after that? And then he said, well, you would have more leisure time then. And then you could do something like walk on the beach. So the point being that, it is something which, it's a sort of a perspective, but also it's like, that's what we would call too the pursuit of what is infinite. The pursuit of what is infinite is not something that you're going to keep trying to get through finite means. Add more, and hopefully that'll take care of it, solve the problem. And in fact, it doesn't solve the problem, because the means that is being used is not the means that is going to solve the problem. So infinite is what I want. Infinite in the, tying it to that story. That story was just for the fun of demonstrating what we're talking about. But infinite is all about, too, discovering that in a spiritual way and through yoga, that whatchamacallit, in that respect, the pursuit is to be what? It is to be something that cannot be pursuable. It cannot be pursuable. So not pursuable means what? It can't be done by doing something limited or finite. But is it possible to get it at all? It's possible to get it, but it cannot be gotten by limited means. And that means what? You have to discover what limitless is. And that it is already accomplished as yourself. This is really the intention of yoga, is to help you discover that, and it's the intention of any spiritual pursuit, really speaking. So it's to help you to discover that what you seek is really the very nature of yourself. You are limitless. Okay? You are limitless, and it's a matter of discovering how what you seek, being what you are, needs to be understood and recognized properly. So, with that being said, then that's why when they use that connection to what is spiritual. Spiritual is something which is, it's like your hand. You have on your hand, you have the index finger, which is the finger of identity. This is what they call the ego, okay? The ego. Then you have also the intellect. The intellectual, we're talking just about the mind right now. So the mind has what? These expressions. The ego, the intellect, the emotions, and memories. Okay, these are the 4 expressions of the mind. Okay, if those 4 expressions, and any day again, any time of day, all day, every day, there is something, you are moving from one expression to another. Sometimes you're emotional. And then you move from being emotional to being what? Intellectual, thinking. And then you have memories, okay? And the whole time we have what is known as the ego. And the ego is what? More or less interspersing itself throughout all these different expressions. And calling the shots, running the show, so to speak. It's the ego that's, in there making decisions and expressing things in that respect. But all of those things, when you look at it that way, this is how the mind functions. And the mind which functions in this way it's functionable, but if there is a spiritual component, it becomes balanced. So without the spiritual component, you've got a hand with 4 fingers and nothing to provide the balance for it. So in this respect then, that thumb represents what is the spiritual aspect or expression of any person. And that spiritual expression of yourself is also that expression which is limitless, which can, balance these other 4 and also provide that end result of you discovering that what you seek is what is already accomplished, already there, but simply not recognized. It is a matter for recognition. So you have to, in the spiritual focus, what is spiritual? Any spiritual focus? Focusing on, in some way, shape, or form, what is limitless. And in the yoga, coming from this tradition, that is very much focused on. That is very much a topic which they hone in on, and they dissect it. They dissect it, every which way and back. Because the idea is, if I just say you should be spiritual, okay, you can even take that to mean imbibing. That's spiritual. Okay, you should be spiritual. All right, but then spiritual means what? I want to be spiritual because I want that result. I want to see, I want limitless. I want what is lasting. And I want to know how it relates to me and how I can, quote, enjoy it, if that's a way to express it. So this is where, in this tradition, and again, it can be presented in other ways, in other places, and it can work for people. But in this tradition, the focus on yoga is really the focus on solving this problem once and for all of missing that I am who I seek, I am what I want, which is limitless, and also demonstrating how that is the case. It's not just enough to say it. You're spiritual. You're immortal. I mean, the expression immortal soul. It is your immortal soul. That is what you want. Okay, I love it. What does it look like? What does it look like? What does the immortal soul look like? A, it's immortal. B, it's a soul. I don't see souls. So I don't have a visual. I want a visual because that's what I'm oriented towards. Visuals. Can you give me a visual of that? Can I wrap my arms around it physically? No, because it's spiritual. It's spiritual.
Unknowable essence.
Yeah, right. Unknowable essence. Unknowable essence is, yes. That's another description. And in describing it that way, you can appreciate essence. Essence is what? That which provides, that which gives life to everything. Gives life to everything. Right? So think about it. We are sitting here in this room, and again, slight digression, but I'll get back to the topic and talk about the yoga as it's explained in the Gita. But it also goes together with this. It's important to understand it as well. Because if I'm saying that you are limitless, that you are, that it is who you are already, the question is, how do you know that? How can you relate to that? And so this is where, again, it's very simple examples. But if you look at the fact that we're sitting in this room, and as we are sitting here, the Earth is spinning at 11,000 miles per minute. Okay, 11,000 miles per minute. Do you feel it? I would say your body does, but in fact, we're kind of facing a strong headwind here, but you don't feel it. No, but the point is, it's 11,000 miles per minute, and in that, no matter what the speed, it's pretty darn fast. It's been doing that for what? They say this universe is 4 billion years old, or some say it's 13 billion. It's like a billion here, what difference does it? Whatever it is. It's a long time. What does that tell you? That's cause, that source, because of which this is capable of doing that, is a power. And that power that is keeping this happening. And you get to go and have coffee at Starbucks and not have to think about it. Is pretty amazing. It's beyond amazing. It's mind-boggling. So you are what? You are here in this room as this planet is moving, as everything is in motion, as there is what? That power that is powering up that spin is powering up everything within the creation, including this body-mind-sense complex, because why? You didn't create your own body-mind-sense complex, and you didn't create the power that's powering it up. You didn't create it. All you're doing is making use of it. You make use of all of it. So that tells you what? That essence, which is in and through everything, is, because you see it in everybody, in every expression, everywhere you turn, there is an expression of that essence. That essence is what is lasting. It hasn't changed. Fundamentally, it hasn't changed. As everything else keeps changing, it's not changing. Are you the essence, or are you what is being powered by the essence? You can't be what is being powered by it, even though you have an association with your body, mind, sense complex. You are the essence. And again, this is a backdoor approach, but you can understand a little bit about this by looking at, some people say, well, I really want to be my body, mind, sense complex. And if you think about it, it's like, why? Why would you want to be? Because it's not, where it's headed is not exactly, pretty. And in fact, that body, mind, sense complex, a very simple example is, you're minding your own business. You haven't changed a thing in your life. And you're pretty much kind of, you could just say walking down the street, and suddenly middle-aged spread kicks in. It didn't consult you. Suddenly your body puts on 20 pounds. If you were your body, would you ever agree to that? No. You wouldn't agree to these changes that are coming to your body. But you don't even get a memo for when they're changing. Suddenly things have shifted. So what does that tell you? It tells you you're not your body. Because if you were, it would not happen. But it happens. And what are you left to deal with? How to keep it going. How to keep it functioning. How to keep it in its most, effective operative mode. Okay? So this is why, we are saying that your body, mind, sense complex is something you get to make use of. The essence but you really speaking are that essence, because the essence is something which you are fully in touch with, non-separate from. This is the yoga connection. Yoga is to help you to connect, if you will, to that essence, but connect in a way that's kind of different. We'll talk about that. But right now, just simply say, this is what needs to be recognized. If what you really want is a lasting sense of limitlessness, recognition of limitlessness, and if you want ultimately to have an abiding sense of well-being, that is part and parcel of this and natural expression. Because when you look at, if you are, here's another thing, if you are identified with your body, and again, people get to do whatever they want, but if you are identified with your body, then in the identification with your body, what happens? At every change, you are affected by it, because the identification is with that. It's, and yet you have at all times the opportunity and the ability to step away and recognize what? That I am not my body. If I am not my body, that means then I will not be affected, because I'm not identifying with it. I will not be affected by what happens to my body. Even though I still am a caretaker. As my teacher would always say, you are the managing trustee of your body. So you're the managing trustee, you have to take care of your body, but you need not identify with it to the point that it drags you down, which is what it's going to do. And the example is, it's something like the dramas in life too are the same. The expression of dramas in life are also similar. So it's not just body, but it's also emotion. These things are all there. If I identify with the emotions, it's the same idea. I get caught up And yet at the same time, I can choose to go towards drama, 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 or I can say, you know what, it's not worth it. Some things you have to pay attention to, but other things you can step away from. And recognize why. You can only step away from them when you recognize, I am not my mind. I am not my body. I make use of my body and my mind, but I need not identify with them to the point that I lose sight of myself. What is that self? It is the self that is powering up the body-mind-sense complex. The essence that powers up all of it. Like again, when you look at the ocean and the wave, you have an ocean, you have a wave, okay? The ocean is like the world, the waves are like the individuals. What is powering up both the ocean and the waves? Water. So water is what powers it up. Water is everywhere, right? Water is in and through the waves and the ocean. And water itself is never affected by any of it. So a wave, putting it in this context, a wave can do what? It can identify with itself as a wave. And if it identifies as a wave, what is it? It's a small, tiny little wave in the vast ocean. If you identify as your body, you're a small, tiny little body in the vast universe. You want to identify with it like that? You get to. But then that leaves you feeling small and limited. What do you want? Do you want limited or limitless? You want limitless, if I'm guessing. You want limitless. If you want limitless, then how do you get it? By a very simple thing. Shift your identity. Like the wave can say, you know what? I have a wave form, but my essence is water. If I go for that identity, what? I am at once all other waves, in and through everything as water. Being water, I am everywhere. I lack nothing because there's nothing away from me because I'm everywhere, in and through the ocean, in and through all other waves. I am water. So in and through, this is the same as the essence. You can choose to identify yourself as a physical body in which you limit yourself, or you can choose to recognize that in fact, just like that wave can recognize it is water, you recognize you are the essence, which is powering up everything, including your own body, and that essence is not changing. And right here, right now, you can do that. You don't have to go anywhere and become essence. Just like the wave doesn't have to go anywhere to become water, right? As my teacher would say, it doesn't need to go to the Indian Ocean to discover its water. It's already water right there. You are already the essence right here, right now. And that essence is limitless. There's a lot more to be said for that because, well, we won't go there because the topic is yoga. Although this is, it is the message of yoga also. This is where yoga ends up. And so I'll say one other thing about the identity and then we'll get technical. We're going to get technical after that. So the other thing is that identification is such an interesting thing because you have the choice at all times to decide, do I want to identify with what is limited or what is limitless? So, and that's, weirdly enough, it's that ego. It's the ego trying to decide, let's see, what should I do? Although it's not necessarily thinking this clearly about it, but just Okay? Limited or limitless? Which one do I want? Okay? And, as I say to people, if it chooses limited, it gets to. You want to be limited, you go right ahead. Knock yourself out. But then you can't complain with what it delivers. Because identifying with what is limited is going to give you nothing but limited, finite, something that doesn't last. That's what it's going to get you. All right? Whereas identifying with what is limitless does what? Gives you limitless. Those are your two choices. So if you decide, you recognize that, yeah, this one is going nowhere. I want what is limitless. Therefore, I put my mind, shift and focus my attention on what is limitless. Then that means that's what I identify with. And identification is something too that people, sometimes it's like they don't. It's so simple, but yet it's so sort of trippy and or controlling. You don't realize how strongly powerful identification is. But people will spend their whole lives identified with something, and that's something that they are pursuing. They are so absorbed in it. And yet at the end of the day, it can never give them something that is lasting because itself is not lasting. So it cannot give that result. So here, the example too is given of, if a father and a child go to a movie, and as the child is in the movie, the child is caught up in the movie, identifying with it at every turn. And the father, what is the father doing? The father is seeing the movie, but knowing it's just a movie, isn't it? So the father is enjoying the movie without identifying with it. And so the difference between the father and the child is one thinks it's really real, and the other knows it's just a movie. It's changing, it's coming and going, but can still enjoy it and participate in it. This is what our life is like. You can choose, just as that child identifies, if you identify with so strongly with the world, then that world seems so real, and it will take you for a ride. But if you say, I don't have to go there. I'm not doing that. I'm not getting caught up in all of that. I can enjoy it and participate in it, but I can also keep it in perspective. That's what we're talking about. And so yoga is intended to help a person go from being stuck or identified to disassociating themselves with the identification. And for that, there is a verse in the Gita which talks about this. And that verse is verse 18 in chapter 4, and I'll chant it, and then I'll talk about what it means in the context of what we just talked about now. Okay? So the verse is, and this will help you to understand too, that I am not making this up. Okay. So here it is. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Karmanya Karmaya Pashet Akarmani Cha Karmayaha Sabuddhima Manusheshu Sayukta Kritsna Karma Krita. Okay, what does that say? That says that person who performs actions and in the performance of the actions recognizes actionlessness, and in actionlessness also sees action, is a wise person. That person is a yogi who has done all that is to be done. Okay, so yogi means what? Someone who is, as I said earlier, connecting to something. So if you are connecting to something, it is because it is the idea of unity. Having a sense of unity and connectedness to whatever it is that you are focusing on. And everybody craves unity. Okay, so everybody craves unity. Why? Because it makes you feel good. Why does it? Because in unity there's harmony. In harmony there's no disturbance. When there's no disturbance, there is peace. And when there is peace, there is a sense of well-being, and one can even say happiness. We prefer the word contentment. Happiness has other connotations. Not that it's wrong, but it has other connotations. So there is a sense of contentment and well-being when that mind has attained a unification. And the unification comes when there is that first recognition of how one performs an action, and in that action one is not performing action. It gets a little trippy, and we're not going to get into a lot of detail with this because there is also another verse that talks about the capacity also to recognize that, inner peace and so on, how it all works. But this verse just simply says that if I am, intent upon being, I want to be a yogi. Why do I want to be a yogi? Because I want that connection. Okay, so I want the connection. So the connection should come when there is no disturbance. And how do I have no disturbance? When I live in a world in which there's constant disturbance, right? There's constant disturbance. Everywhere you turn. Even if you try to be peaceful, what happens? You can't control the motorcycles. Or you can't control the loud music that comes from somewhere else. You're trying to meditate, and of course other people will have other ideas. So with all of that, there's constant disturbance, constant challenges, and you want to have this continued state of well-being. So how is that possible when you can't escape what is to be done? So he says you develop an attitude. And the attitude is one in which you recognize that with any performance of action, and this is the part that's, as I said, it might sound a little trippy, but it's very clear and straightforward in that you are the performer of actions, in as much as actions are to be done. And talking how we just saw that you are what? You have the capacity to stand back from your body and your mind. All right? So you have the capacity to stand back from your body and your mind. If you have the capacity to stand back from your body and your mind, you are what is known as a witness. Does that make sense? Okay, so you are a witness. As a witness, what happens? You can observe that your body is doing actions and your mind is thinking. So 1 minute your mind might be thinking one way, the next minute it's thinking another way, and it's like, in some ways, again, your mind could be running amok. It's running amok, and you have no idea why. And sometimes it's like, I had a teacher once who said the mind is like a child. Sometimes you have to coddle it. Other times you have to be strong with it. Other times you have to ignore it. Other times you have to distract it. And other times you can just enjoy it. Okay. So in all of these cases, we are looking at, and of course, meditation, the intent of meditation is to help you be able to see how the mind works and stand free and clear and abide in yourself. So this is the intent of any meditation practice. So here what they're saying is that as a yogi is someone who is at once observing, and this is again, as I said, it's understanding. In that understanding, then comes, you will naturally express or be a karma yogi. You will naturally be someone who is devotional, someone who is spiritual. All that comes when there is understanding of what that is. And so that's what he's saying here. He's saying that one who is capable of recognizing that, and anybody is capable of doing this, but it's a question of whether you're paying attention to make that shift and say, in the performance of all actions, I am not doing anything. Okay. As all actions are occurring, I am not doing anything. Why? Because what? Where is the action occurring? In the mind and in your body. All right. So does that make sense? You are not performing any action. The action is occurring where? At the level of your mind or your body. Where are you in all of this? You witnessing. You are the witness. You are the one who is witnessing all of this. The one who is witnessing is not performing the actions. So you are in it, but you are not of it. Performing actions, but standing free and clear at the same time, as long as you make that mental, you have that awareness and make that connection. So that he says is the expression of a yogi, someone who has this, and further, someone who is what? Seeing even when nothing is going on, seeing action and actionlessness. That's the other piece of it. So action and actionlessness is like, what? What does that mean? Wasn't the first one good enough? What's the rest of this? Because he's saying also that action may be going on even when nothing is happening. And again, you are able to stand free and clear of even that. And why do they say this? Why did they get into it? Because somebody could say, the first one was saying, if I see actionlessness in action, meaning what? I am the one who is not performing any action, even though my body and my mind are acting. That's the first one. The second one is saying, somebody could come along and say, okay, that's fine, but what about when I do nothing? If I'm doing nothing, that's not an action. I'm doing nothing. To which he responds, well, actually you are. What are you doing? Nothing. So that even not that you're doing nothing, but also you may be sitting there, but there's a lot going on. Your body is digesting, it's respirating, it's circulating, it's doing all those things, but they are not your actions. They are actions again. They are there may be an appearance of actionlessness because what? You're just hanging out, sitting, having a leisurely day. I mean, your body's doing nothing, and your mind, even, sometimes you have a mind too, you can't get it to work for love or money. Your mind can't function. As much as you would like your mind to function sometimes, again, you didn't negotiate it with it. So it's not doing anything. So when those times occur, you recognize what? That I am at all times free and clear, whether there's a lot of action going on or whether there is no action going on. And either way, I perform no action. If I perform no actions, mental, oral, physical actions, and if you can come up with another category, I'd love to hear it. But if you are performing in any one of these ways, or these are occurring, you are never the performer of the actions. You are the essence that powers them up. Like, let's go back to our water, ocean, wave. The water, really speaking, is never doing anything, right? It's not doing anything. Intrinsically, water is H2O. H2O, H2O, H2O. It's not doing anything. It's just being there, powering up ocean and waves. What's happening? The ocean's knocking about. The waves are going crazy. But the water's doing nothing. And yet, it powers up ocean and waves. In the same way, that essence which powers up and keeps all the planets on track, keeps the universe running in pretty good shape, so that you can go have your coffee. You can count on it. As my teacher would say, gravity never takes a day off. So you can count on the fact that it's going to, keep functioning. So that power that's powering all of this up is really the very inherent expression of yourself, just like the inherent expression or essence or truth of the wave is water. The truth of your body, mind, sense complex is that unchanging essence, which is never affected by what happens to the body, mind, sense complex, just like the water is never affected by what happens to the ocean or the waves. So when it comes to identification, you get to choose. Which one do you want to be? So, but in the recognition of seeing that I am limitless, I am infinite. In a way, it's a no-brainer, because why would I choose what is not going to last? And so that connection, if you will. But he says in another verse, which I believe is verse 21 of chapter 6, he says that connection is one of, it is disassociation from association with sorrow. That is yoga. Yoga is disassociation from the association with sorrow. Why do they kind of, it's like, wasn't the first one good enough? And it's in a different chapter, by the way. But wasn't that? No. Because, why? Because yoga, when you talk about connection, see, we get very, very persnickety about words and how they work. And connection has a problem. Even though the word yoga means to connect, to become united, there's a problem with that. Why? Because what? At any point in time, you can become disconnected, right? If you become connected with something, you then become possibly disconnected. Okay? And even though all that I just said very succinctly says you can never become disconnected from what is the essence, okay? Just like the wave can never become disconnected from the water, you can never become disconnected from the essence. Still, if there is this thinking of somehow there's got to be a union or association, Krishna comes along and says, if there's any association, if you're going to use yoga in that context, you have to say the association, yoga is the association, it's the association with the disassociation from sorrow. Okay? So it gets, again, a little bit involved. Disassociating from sorrow, association with the disassociation from sorrow. So you get the meaning of yoga by saying it's an association, it's a connection. But then what do you say it's connected to? It's connected to the disassociation with sorrow. That's what it's connected to. Which means what? This is where the plot really thickens. Why does he say the disassociation? Association with the disassociation from sorrow? Because sorrow is what rules the day. We are very much connected to sorrow. Like that song. I am a man of constant sorrow. Every song is about sorrow. When we wake up in the morning, what do we have, generally speaking? If we're not awareful and alert at any time, your mind is always ready to go there. Into what? The world of limitations. Anytime there is an association with an identification and association with something that is limited, what happens? Sorrow. Why? Because in limitation, there's always going to be sorrow. There is no getting away from it. So a limitation brings, because as soon as you think about, I don't have this, or this happened, or why did that happen? Or, everything was working, but this isn't working. That particular verse is a beautiful verse of which there's a lot to be said. And, I won't get into all of it now, just touch on it and then, can conclude. But the idea is that anytime that you have association with sorrow means what you are identifying with, what a limitation. And when there is identification with any limitation, sorrow will come because you cannot accept the limitations. And for good reason. Nobody should accept limitations. But at the same time, in spite of yourself, things are limited. In spite of yourself, the body is limited. In spite of yourself, your mind is like whatever. And in the context, I should slightly digress here, but then I'll come back to this. Slightly digress in saying the other meaning of yoga is mastery. Mastery over all of this. You want mastery over the mind. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. That's the second sutra, first or second sutra, Patanjali. Which is what? That you should have a mastery over the mind. Yeah. That there should, that mastery. Why is there an emphasis on mastery? Because mastery means what? I manage that mind so that I can direct it going towards what is limitless, what is focusing on the bigger picture. Because if I keep doing that, over time, what happens? And of course, that's the other thing. It's like, okay, I have to focus my mind away from sorrow. I have to focus my mind away from sorrow. How do I focus my mind away from sorrow? By not focusing on what is limited. That's how you focus on what is. That's where spiritual comes in again. And I'm telling you, any spiritual pursuit in which, whether they use prayer, whether they use mantra, whether they use whatever spiritual practice is being used, if the intention is to move past, and if they're just saying, no, I'm not, I don't know anything about all this yoga stuff, I'm just connecting to God. Fine. Why? Because all of that is expanding. It's taking your mind. Anytime you shift your mind from what is limited to what is limitless, or what represents limitless, this is the identification. You're not stuck there, you have expanded. Your mind has expanded. As soon as you expand your mind, there is a freedom. A freedom from those limitations, and a freedom from sorrow, and a disassociation from association with sorrow. So that's what it takes. It just takes shifting. That's what a spiritual pursuit is all about. And ultimately, somebody could say too, because nobody wants to be sorrowful. And if they do want to be sorrowful, then then it's like, because some people do say, nothing like a good, what do you call it?
Pity part. Drama.
Yeah.
Drama.
Right. And on the one hand, the flip side is the beauty. The flip side and the beauty of it is, we don't say, or this tradition does not say, much less it can control whether your mind is sorrowful or not. Your mind is going to go there. Sometimes it's healthy to go there to process, as long as you don't get stuck there. The idea is that things happen and you are trying to understand how things work. And so that's using your mind to get past your mind. That's healthy. And or if the mind goes down the tubes, you don't have to go with it. And that can happen when you have a distance. When you recognize, I am the witness to my own mind. I have these spiritual practices, whatever they are, will shift my mind. And, if I do choose to be sorrowful, then I do it with my eyes wide open. I choose to identify with that. Doing it with my eyes wide open means what? That you have a grip on it. So you're not going to get carried away with it. You're just seeing what it's all about. But at the same time, it's always, ultimately, because some people think, well, then that means that my mind has to be happy, 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 happy. Always happy, happy, happy. And guess what? Anybody who tries to be happy, 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 will be happy, 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 happy. I'm supposed to be happy. I'm not happy. That's where the Gita comes in again and says, no matter, and there's so many verses in there in various ways talking about how, in fact, if I can remember it, although it's, I may not, but it's for what it's worth, it's verse 48 of chapter 2, in which it uses the word yoga again, talking about having balance. This is the most important, critical thing of all of this, is to do what? Recognize that it isn't about what state of mind your mind is in. It's recognizing exactly, samatvam, balancing. It is being steady, no matter whether your mind, remember what I said before, it's like a child. Sometimes it needs to be ignored. Sometimes it needs to be attended to. Sometimes it needs to be distracted, But the mind is going to do what the mind is going to do. You can control it to a certain extent. That's the practice of self-mastery, in which karma yoga, there's a whole big thing about karma yoga, what that is, what that means. It's attitude. Everything is attitude based upon understanding, based upon knowing that I am free and clear no matter what is going on with my mind or my body. So it isn't about having a happy state of mind constantly. And if, not to say that you can't strive for being upbeat and positive, in the motivational speaking world, there is what they talk about is counting your blessings, being thankful. All of these things are good. All of these things keep your mind in an up position. But if your mind goes down, you don't have to get carried away with it. Just like you shouldn't get carried away with it when it's up or down. That's what happens. People get carried away with this mind and then with this one. They go up, they go down. Yo, 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 yo. It's the problem is not the mind, the problem is you identify with it. That's really what it is. So you don't want to get so identified with it that it takes you for a ride and you are at the mercy of whatever is happening in your mind. What's the fun in that? Because you have no idea where your mind's going next. Even if you think it should go here, it goes someplace else. It's like, wait, sometimes you can't even keep up with it. This is why I say, and some people, probably sick of hearing this. But the other thing is, they did this study of saying 50,000 people on average have 50,000 thoughts a day. I don't know who they talk to. I got to figure 250,000 easy. This mind is going this way and that way. I don't know why it goes. And of course you can manage it, yes. And you can focus it, yes. But at the same time, if you have a steady, abiding, presence and understanding, then when it goes this way or that, you do not get displaced by it. That's yoga. And that happens when there is a disassociation from the association with sorrow. Okay? Meaning what? I don't buy into everything it projects. And I don't do that when I have an awareness around how it all works. And that, of course, and somebody says, okay, it all sounds like a good plan, sign me up. How do I do that? And this is where, of course, it is first having that understanding. This is, of course, the yoga means understanding that I am focusing on something that goes beyond all of this, focusing on what is limitless, which doesn't get displaced. Again, I'll just repeat this. Like the water does not get displaced when the ocean or the waves are going crazy. It's not affected that way. It's not affected when there's nothing going on. In the same way, the essence that you are is never affected by the ups and the downs. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to be abiding, have that samatvam, that steadiness, which comes by what? First, knowing, and then by meditation. Meditation is the opportunity that you give to yourself to own that. Because in everyday living, you don't get that opportunity. You don't get the chance to own this.
So meditation will help keep things in balance.
Meditation gives you, yes, it will give you familiarity. Because, and typically in that way, what happens is, every day, all day, every day, you don't get the chance to shift gears. I just presented something to you now. Hopefully it made sense. Hopefully it did something for you. But at the same time, if it doesn't stick with you, because it may not, then it's because you have a lot of stuff going on. And your attention is directed or pulled in all these other directions. So even though it made sense, yet you're not able to abide with it or keep it, it's because that familiarity is not there. So how do you become familiar with that? Meditation does that. It gives you that opportunity to, quote, own it, even though it really isn't an owning thing because it's already yourself. It's just, it gives you that opportunity to be with yourself and to recognize you are bigger than all of this. And when you see that you are bigger than all of this, you are free from all of it, even though you engage in all of it. Like the dad going to the movie.
Conquer any mountain.
That's right.
Silence is the mindful law.
Yeah. Go big or go home. So this is the idea. Expanding the mind, and when the mind expands and you give yourself that capacity to see how things are, what they are, then with that, there is yoga. There is a quote union, if you will, but it is not a union in the sense, in the strictest sense, because really speaking, you can't connect. You don't become united with what you already are. The wave doesn't become united with the water. It's already the water. So then what is the yoga piece? It is disconnecting from everything that you are not. So that's really, and that happens when it becomes abundantly clear in your mind.
And that's why we seem to be here.
Exactly. As though.
It helps you achieve conscious awareness.
Yes. Yes. And it keeps it in view.
Remind you, yeah.
Right. And the other thing, thank you, and the other beauty of meditation is that the more you do it, the more it takes hold.
Piece of cake.
And it sets. It stays with you.
That's
It doesn't just come and go.
That's what my master said.
Yeah. Because
If you meditate, you should be able to take that meditation with you all day
Right.
long.
Yes.
meditate, and in fact, meditation is, you only know if it's really working when it's, in action,
Exactly.
when it's walking meditation, when it's
Sitting
expressing through.
meditation, when it's dancing meditation,
Yeah.
when everything is meditation.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So what this does, all of this, and this is the knowledge piece of it, this gives you wherewithal. It gives you, something to see so that when you do that meditation, you got something to back it up. Because if you don't have something to back it up, it makes it a little more challenging. Because if I say, somebody says, well, meditate on what is limitless. Love it. Meditate on what is limitless. Okay, what is it? What does it look like? It's pretty hard to meditate on something when you don't know what it looks like or what it is. So now you have a recognition or appreciation. Oh, it happens to be who you are. And you are bigger than all of this because you go beyond all of this. And again, I just touched on it. It's the tip of the iceberg. So there's a lot more to be said, but I hope that this gives you that understanding of, the significance of, understand the significance of the terms yoga and really how it works. And in that respect, again, I mentioned that it is the self-mastery piece. Well, the self-mastery piece also, the meaning of that, really relies again on knowledge. First, you got to know, because people misconstrue, and I'll say this much and then I'll open it up for any questions or comments if there are any. But people misconstrue all the time that self-mastery means, controlling the senses, controlling the mind, controlling everything, and in that, then what? You become, not only an unhappy camper, but rigid, and you don't accomplish anything other than, making yourself and everybody else miserable.
You're stuck.
You become a control freak.
You become right, something. Everybody knows you're going to blow at some point, because if you're forcing, you're forcing it. Forcing it means what? Suppression.
Suppression.
You keep suppressing it, sooner or later, it's going to give. And when it does, look out. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that person. I submit, in part, this is road rage. So people suppress, and I'm not talking about in terms of yoga, I'm just talking in general. It's suppression, and then all it takes is somebody to do some small thing, and they blow. So this is really, in talking about this, self-mastery is really about knowing, again, the focus is the more you see who you are and looking at the bigger picture, the more natural it becomes to let go of all that small stuff. You don't get caught up in all the other, the distractions fall away. It's more natural that way. And this is the mastery. Mastery comes, of course, there has to be maybe some effort, like you don't eat, the whole box of chocolates or something, you know. So there has to be some mastery given, efforts made at some point, but then it really comes from knowing and also knowing what action is. How do I perform actions? And I'll say this much, action, you know, self-mastery in karma yoga. Karma yoga simply means I have an appreciation that because I didn't create this creation, I was born into this creation. I didn't create my body. I was blessed with a body. I didn't create my mind. I was blessed with a mind. I get to make use of all of these, or I get to abuse them. It's up to me. But if I recognize that I am blessed, and because of that I can head in the direction that I want to head in, and I do that, and I do what is the right thing, so I have doing the right thing so that I don't bring harm or create any more disturbance. I also have a recognition, an attitude of gratitude for what has been given to me. And I have ultimately what is known as prasada buddhi, which is accepting what comes, you know, even if it isn't what I wanted, because in that acceptance I can grow, I can learn. Like they say in the commercial world that the only failure is the failure to learn. So if I learn from failure, it doesn't mean I have to accept. Some people think, well, I have to accept it. I just have to sit there and accept it. You know, I'm stuck. No, you accept what happens and then you move on. It's okay, that's not what I wanted. What do I want? Do I still want it? Okay, how do I get it? Let's try this. Let's do that. Let's, you know. So all of that is part of a karma yoga attitude. And that's what frees the mind. Again, how does that work? It frees your mind from getting stuck in the vortex of limitations. So that's another piece. Again, all of this, there's a lot more to be said, but I hope that I conveyed a general understanding. I very much enjoyed it, and I hope it helped you, and thank you.
Thank you.